Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We were just doing a little bit of research in the background there. Do apologize about that. Welcome to our show right here with Lou, Wasserman's Ghost, on this great episode, I'm sure, of Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you.
Have
Thank
we
you so
ever
much for
had
joining
one
us.
that isn't great?
I don't think we have, Lou.
I
Honestly,
don't, I may be prejudiced, but there is great. What's that old joke statement? They said, some people are born great and some people have greatness thrust upon them. Certainly, there's a lot of that in the casting couches. But anyway, we're starting off to find the level of the audience, and everybody who laughed at that knows who they are. Good morning, good afternoon, all that stuff, as people are saying in the chat. Oh my God, we got ourselves a little birdie sticker.
we do. Samuel Maine already out the gate with a $3 super sticker right there. What a little guy giving us the thumbs up. Well, thank you so much, Samuel Maine. Thumbs up to you, good sir. As we kick things off, thank you for your amazing generosity right there. Coming out the gate hot. That's pretty cool. Yeah, we were just doing a little bit of research on Hollywood, Highland, Grauman's, but all of this was precipitated by a recommendation by you, Mr. Lou Watson.
I got a book review for you folks to start things off, if you'd like. I happened across something I've heard for years was great, and by God, it is. And all of you who care about the history of this crazy business, and I'm assuming that's most all of you if you're watching this show, you got to get this book. It's really, 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 really fun. And it's called City of Nets. And it is a history of Hollywood, particularly in the 10 years of the 1940s. But I have only read so far the part leading up to those 10 years, which he summarizes in the entire history of how LA came to be and the whole issues of bringing in water and turning orange groves into suburban housing and all the rest of that stuff. But it's full of choice memorabilia for those interested in how we got where we are. And it also points out how the business basically totally transformed itself and collapsed by the end of that decade because of, as we've talked about, the consent decree where the antitrust people made them get rid of the theaters, like Grauman's, which you see there, and also other issues. But believe it or not, excuse me, the issue or factoid that I was sharing with Vash just before we began, in 1939, which of course was not only the opening of this decade, but also the year that the famous Teutonic leadership of a strange country far, far away marched into the famous Polish territory and started a conflagration. How's that for dodging all those words that YouTube doesn't like, Vash? But in that year, believe it or not, 50 million Americans, in a time when our population was, what did we just find? 115, 120, something like that.
130 million about.
All right, but 50 million of us, and if you take off, very young and very old, that narrows down, went to the movies every single week, all year long, at least once. Now, granted, there was no television to compete, certainly no streaming and all the other things, but that's a whole heck of a lot of people and a whole heck of a lot of influence that this town had over the culture and the opinions and the worldview, if you will, of our nation. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, as they say.
You were going over this book here, and I am just unbelievably fascinated with the little factoids that are in there, and also, too, how the author has just been like, you know what? I'm not going to do any interviews. You know why? Because they're wrong. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I know and tell you what I've learned.
Well, what he goes into, for example, is he says, look, all of these famous people have been either interviewed by journalists or interviewed by publicists or had statements invented by publicists, and all of it recycled into either real or ghosted autobiographies so much that there's no point in just, going out and talking to people again about what they remember, because the ones that are still around may not remember much, in fact, or may not want to, in fact. So he basically culls all the various sources for information and gives you what his expert opinion, and he is an expert historian, is real versus the fantasy. Anyway, it's pretty darn great, and it takes facts, cold facts that I happen to have known because I'm expert at this and was around, and because I grew up there, and weaves them into a kind of well, he gives you the little details you didn't know. For example, I have mentioned, I believe, on this program that when you see the burning of Atlanta sequence in Gone with the Wind, that's not Clark Gable, that's not Vivian Lee. Those are two stand-ins in a buckboard driving through what was the old RKO lot that MGM and Selznick had taken over. And a lot of those buildings burning are things you have seen in other movies and would never recognize, because they said, how are we going to do this sequence? And they got a bright idea of dressing up, for example, the great gate behind which lived King Kong to look like it was the streets of Atlanta in the era of the Civil War, and then burn it down. And so they ran all of these. He goes into the detail of how they ran all of these pipes and gas pipes and water pipes and things to set those fires, and how they made a big event out of it. They invited all the people in Hollywood to come out and, drink champagne and watch the Backlot burn, along with 150 cops and a bunch of firemen to make sure it didn't get into the neighborhoods next door. And David O. Selznick, the producer, had a brother who was kind of a famous drunk and a kind of a famous character, and he was supposed to be there live, and he was late because he was partying, and he showed up with this British actress that nobody knew, who had come to LA basically to be with her boyfriend, who people did know, named Laurence Olivier, and her name was Vivian Lee. And after having tested 500 people to be Scarlett O'Hara, he showed up. He said, hey, brother, I got your Scarlett O'Hara right here. So she was there for it, even though she wasn't in the shooting. And there you go. And I'm seeing big news is breaking in the real world.
Yes, I'm seeing big news
although
as well.
This will run for a long time, we should mention that.
Hang on. We got to do our breaking news. Yes, folks. Breaking news. It seems that the political world just loves popping off during this show. It's last week we had the 45th president of the United States give his historic speech at the Republican National Convention, and now we have the active president of the United States dropping out of the race for the 2024 presidential election. Huge news right here. This will absolutely upend the political landscape going into 2024. So that's, and it literally popped off right when we were going live, like right as I hit the live button. This is when this news drops. Lou, your reactions.
Well, the obvious question. There are many obvious questions, and this is not a political show. But if I can put on my wise old man hat, if you've decided you are not up to running, are you up to serving for the rest of the term? Is one big question. Because he's still the guy with the finger on the button, and he's still the guy with the Oval Office and everything else. The second question becomes, there's some legal issues as far as money.
Yes.
Apparently, the money that's been raised for him as a candidate, which is over $100 million, has to be used to elect him. If he drops out, he cannot automatically just hand it to Kamala or the party or anybody else, because he's now a private citizen who can donate a maximum of $2,500 to any presidential campaign. So there's going to be all kinds of complications regarding that. And then there's going to be complications about getting somebody else on the ballot in various states that have different rules. So the point is, this is a big breaking story, but we ain't heard nothing yet. And I think we should probably just leave it around there, because after that, it's all speculation. We don't know.
Oh, yeah, I would just about leave it there, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to transpire in order to have this transition take place.
And whether people decide this decision was made because of the debate or because of the attempted assassination, or because of the convention just now. I think wisely, the people on the other side are running against the policies and the situation right now, and the whole "are you better off than you were 4 years ago" thing. And that goes with whoever the person winds up being. Because if the person comes in and says, "I can fix it," what are they fixing? They're fixing what they endorsed. So I'll leave it at that. I could go on, but I won't. Meanwhile, back in showbiz.
Back in show business, everybody at home, look up Chicago 1968 DNC, and then we'll leave it right there because I think that is about to happen once again right here. Not to worry, Liberty Hall's cat says, "Not to worry, Vash. In 30 to 40 years, you can tell stories about WWE Pro, Jonas, Valiant, Max, and Iron Man behind the scenes of YouTube." Yeah. Well, not too much. Not too much.
Well, have you ever seen, on the genre guys, one of the great movies we've covered is A Bridge Too Far. And there's a great scene when the British general who's briefing the troops gets up on the stage and he says, "Gentlemen, you are about to write a story that you will tell your grandchildren, and mightily bored they'll be when you tell it." So I don't think our exploits, what's that line from the Leslie Nielsen thing about it's easy to see our problems of two little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world, but this is our hill and these are our beans. So with that said, and with hopefully no brain results of beans, let's continue.
Yes, sir.
One of the things we wanted to do before we went into new questions was talk about our epic show that was on this past week, which if you haven't seen, you definitely want to see, all about the settlement of the IATSE contract. And I wanted to kind of add an addendum to it about the subject of residuals. We talked a lot about them, but I never really explained to you what the heck they are, and although you may think you know, why they exist. The first thing is that these extra residual payments that they put in that we talked about for streaming shows and how they would be calculated and how that would expose. Yes, Josh, we see you exhibitionist, you. We forgot to mention, or I guess I mentioned, but I didn't make a stressed point of it, and I wanted to do it now. Not everybody gets residuals. The second grip and the third dolly grip and the electricians, gaffers, they don't get residuals. Those payments that they're talking about are for the program itself, just for existing and what it does or doesn't do related to the viewership and whatever. Some individuals get them, and they still get them, and it's the same as they've always got them. So that new residual schedule is for the program and is, again, a way of replenishing the health plan and the pension plan. And, of course, everybody who qualifies for the health and pension plan reaps the rewards of those payments, even if they didn't individually get paid. But residuals were based on the concept that if you gave a performance, well, when you work in the theater and you do a play on Broadway, every night you do the play and every night you get paid. But if you make it as a movie, you do it once, not counting reshoots and takes and what have you, but it is seen by audiences over and over again. And therefore, the concept of paying you a residual was that you're being paid for the reuse or the re-exhibition of your original work. And that is why, for example, all of the residual schedules, you'll hear the people, for example, from Star Trek talk about how on the original series, yeah, they got paid for, I think it was in those days, the first 11 or 12 or 15 showings repeated, but after that, not. So residuals diminish over time, and because the value of that performance lessens, the more people have already seen it, is the theory. So I just wanted to make that clear so you'd understand that that's why people get residuals, and especially why, for example, actors and writers and directors get them, but not necessarily key grips and craft service and those people who are thought of more as working at a regular job, that this week is this show and next week is next show and next week is some other show. So there you go.
I have also heard, I haven't done much research on this myself, but I believe Jonas did inform me that one of the reasons why Apple Studios was some of their productions were so unbelievably expensive was because they were paying upfront a flat fee in which to to basically avoid paying residuals for that
Well,
content down the line.
well, I don't know if it depends on who it is, of course, how much they demand to do
Sure.
that. But this idea of paying a flat fee rather than a percentage and follow up, aside from the fact that it may or may not be cheaper, it is certainly easier for the calculations. For example, most of the toy commercials you've seen in your life, where here's a cute little boy and he's playing with his GI Joe doll in the living room. Guess where that got shot? Usually in Germany on an American military base, because these toy guys didn't want to have to pay American kid actors residuals, because that commercial is going to run for 6 months for Mattel's Hot Wheels or GI Joe or whatever. And they would go to an American family with nice, very obviously American looking kids with American clothes in a semi-American backdrop and say, we'd like to pay you 500, 1,000, whatever it is, to come in for a day and watch your kids play with the toys. Okay. End of deal. Buyout, as they call it, rather than a contract as actors. Because of course they weren't actors. They were just kids doing what kids do. And there was some direction involved. And obviously they didn't normally have lights and cameras and microphones in their living rooms. But that's been the standard practice for a long, long time on a lot of these things. Not so much on big famous stuff like on Apple, but that idea of a buyout in lieu of residuals has been around. But of course, it requires that the people who are doing the acting make their union agree to take that deal, because technically that's not the way the contract reads. So
Sure. Yep, absolutely. There's a there's a lot of stipulations involved in doing just about anything here because of these, agreements like the one you see before you right now. And I don't think we were clear on the show that we covered all of this, but we just want to make it clear that the IATSE members did vote to ratify the 2024 agreement right there.
And there's a lot more to it, obviously, than this residual issue. But I just wanted to put a button on that so people understood it. And now, if you can think of anything else other than the headlines of the moment,
well,
let's answer some questions.
I wanted to bring this question to you, Lou, about this because I didn't get it. I forgot to ask you at the time. We talked about Carla Ortiz in that video and her thoughts on generative AI and so forth. And her impression from being, I guess, part of an IATSE family since the time she grew up was that this agreement might be a Trojan horse, and that it gives a lot of great benefits and so forth to not only the IATSE union but many of the unions, because of that favored nations issue that you were talking about before, but that because of because of the compulsion to use generative AI and how upending for the entire industry that will eventually be, that we're getting stuff in the short term, but long term, where does this go? What do you think about all that?
I think she's got her view, and she should be unsurprised that people said, "Oh, you're going to give me 7.5% and a better deal, and I'll take the money. Thank you very much," especially when they're all broke and struggling now. To the degree that it's a Trojan horse, I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. Any contract has good stuff, bad stuff, undetermined stuff that will only work out as the time goes by. AI isn't going away. The issues surrounding it aren't going away. There are provisions in here to alter those terms as things progress. We tend, I guess, especially when we've had such labor unrest in the biz, in the face of a time when the biz itself has been pretty lousy compared to recent past. We've had this impression that this is a big watershed moment. And as I said when we discussed it on the previous show, a lot of these particular issues were handled for the first time But you know what happens when things get handled for the first time? Is that now the dam is broken and we can try it out and see it. And we might find out, the way we did that wasn't so great. Maybe we want to do it this way. And again, so all I'm saying is, although negotiations happen specifically around contract dates, they never really stop. They're always ongoing. And I think there's enough good in this that whatever Trojan horse she sees looming in the backdrop is probably something that was going to happen anyway. And
That's a fair point.
At least they've set some boundaries and some ground rules for it to happen and to discuss it further and alter things as things go on. So that's my opinion at first.
Hey, I like it. I want to hear from a real industry expert on your thoughts on that, because I thought that was a very interesting argument. We do have a question, and this time for the boss himself, WW Pro, coming in with $5. Thank you so much, Pro. Very much appreciate it, and your support of this show has been unbelievable. I often find you in the chat on a lot of these things, and it's so great to see you, and so great to see you.
You ever working at your job out there, folks, and suddenly you look over your shoulder and the boss is watching? That's that's what that's talking about.
That's funny.
And the answer to his big question is nope.
Really?
Nope.
Oh, why?
And the reason I say nope is your definition of traditional may not be mine. Now, do I think shows that appeal to families and have values will come back? Yes, because people appeal to values and have families. Do I think it will come back in the form and the way that we used to do it? No, because first of all, we got a whole lot of those in the can. And people, obviously, as we look at these numbers on, I don't know, places like Hulu, where a lot of the old shows are living again, obviously, they don't necessarily need updating, as far as the fact that, on the Genre Guys, we were watching a movie shot in the 70s, 80s. And surprise, surprise, guy pulled out a walkie-talkie. There were no cell phones. Is what he's saying dependent on the technology or the era or the hairstyles or whatever? No. The content, the core values, the lessons learned are the same. So in that sense, tradition is alive and well and available. But as far as making them the way we used to, nah, nobody wants to. Look at how we're making 8-episode series and 10-episode series and whatever, and not 26 a year for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
So I don't think so is my answer. I think it will not be unrecognizable, but it will not be the same. And that's my answer.
The whole model has been upended because, like you were saying before, usually you would have a show produced like a sitcom, right? 26 episodes and enough years in the tank in order to get to syndication. Do you want to go ahead and tell us what syndication is?
Let's ponder that and come back to it.
Okay, all right. We'll ponder it then.
Because again, I think one of our problems as a people seeking entertainment or anything else is the quest for the new, the improved, the utterly different. Hey, this isn't like your grandma's whatever. Well, maybe it is, and we just put new makeup on grandma. So this whole idea of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, modernity, can be overrated.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think modernity is overrated to some degree. I think the studios have recognized that, which is why they're going back to a lot of those economic models. We just actually covered a article on that Park Place. I believe it was from Deadline, suggesting that fast channels or streaming services with the fast model were
magically going to save the world.
Services.
And it remains to be. They told us people would watch The Acolyte too.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I
did
just,
they
I'm
tell us that
sorry.
people would watch it?
I just get a little suspicious of people who say they have the magic answer to everything that's ailing us, when they're the same people who had the last answer and the one before that and the one before that. That's all. Let's see. Let's wait and see.
Yep. This is the
What's
article.
that? What's that old, the Magic 8-Ball fortune telling toy that had a thing that said, "View is hazy, return later and ask again," or something like that? Remember those things? It was kind of the placeholder answer. So that's kind of my answer as far as Pro's question. Is
Gotcha.
that the kind like I used to make, the kind like my mama used to make, as the saying goes. I just don't see it happening again, because there's not that reliable. Hey, we can make 20 or 30 of these for 5 or 6 or 7 years possibility anymore. There just isn't. So to my view.
To clarify for Ken Reinhardt, Fast is free ad-supported streaming TV. There was actually a whole section about Fast channels actually in the IATSE contract, which was very fascinating. But as you can see right here on this article, Fast platforms had bigger TV share than many premium streamers once again in June. What is driving their success? And look at that. You have
wait a
TV,
minute.
you have Tubi, you have Roku.
The fact that they have viewers doesn't mean they're a success yet. It's when the viewers and the advertising pay the bills and make a profit that they're a success.
Bingo.
Pardon me for looking at the scorecard and saying, guy's got the best RBI in his league, but his team is still not in the World Series.
That's it.
So there you go.
It's true.
And as I've said before, how we keep score has got to change, because the old easy way, which is how much did it cost and how many tickets did we sell and how much of that money did we keep, is fast becoming a dinosaur.
Fast becoming a dinosaur? I like what you did right there. But
I didn't even know I did it, but you're right. Sometimes I amaze even me.
You see? There you go. Even with another movie quote right there, this time from Star Wars. I love it. Very, very interesting just how the entire industry is changing, and what they told us, like you said, Lou, what they told us before that was going to be the new thing is, well, now what's old is new again. I'll just put it that way. Somebody asked a question right here. Let me just see if I can find it in the chat. I'm trying to star these things, but it's moving so quick on me. Okay, let me see here. Let me see. Well, I think it's Lutheran Prime says, is Bob Iger an AI bot? Oh no, that was Humphrey Bear. Humphrey Bear said that. I do apologize. There we go.
And wait, somebody said something about YouTube is syndication. No, it's not. YouTube is nothing like syndication, and let me explain to you about syndication.
Please.
In the days when you had NBC, CBS, ABC making primetime, and syndication was Channel 9 and Channel 11 and Channel 13 and 5 and maybe then UHF, VHF, all that stuff. First of all, major network shows quickly became more expensive than what the networks could pay them, even if they were hit, must-see TV shows. Whatever the first run ad revenue was, it didn't pay the full bill. And the reason was because when they became that big a hit, the stars, the directors, the producers asked for more money and got it to keep making it. And therefore, syndication was where the profit was. But syndication had its own issues, mainly that if you were a primetime show that aired once a week on a Thursday night on NBC, when you went to syndication, you were either airing at 4, 5, 6 in the afternoon 5 nights a week or 6 nights a week, or in that 11 to 11:30 spot where the local news ran before Johnny Carson. Okay. Again, 5 nights a week or more. And in some cases, they'd run 2 different episodes on Saturday, one in the afternoon and one in the evening or more. Well, guess what? When you make 22 or 23 or 26, or in the old days, 30 something, you still go through them pretty darn fast at 5 a week rather than 1. And pretty soon it's, oh, I saw that one 6 weeks ago. Oh, I saw that one 5 times. Oh, I'm not going to tune it in anymore. So there was a kind of a cutoff point, after which syndication became not viable, and before which syndication became not viable. In other words, if you did a primetime show that only lasted a year or two, there was no syndication because we couldn't rerun it often enough without having to rerun it a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time too soon for the audience to be hungry for more. So a lot of shows that were very successful as far as ratings and as far as their first run never made a buck in syndication because they didn't have enough shows in the can. Conversely, at a certain point, which was usually around 6, 7, 8 seasons, you had plenty. You didn't need any more for syndication. And to spend the kind of money you were spending to make them didn't make sense. And that is when, for certain shows, for example, I remember ER, popular show, expensive show because it's an hour-long drama. It's got a big cast, it's got a big writing staff, it's got a big producing and directing staff. And after 7 or 8 years, they had enough for syndication forever. They had enough to not bore the audience by rerunning them too often if they ran them 5 nights a week on Channel 13. Okay? But the network wanted new ones. Why? Because they could introduce new shows after ER. These shows became what they call tentpole to an evening. And so they came into the ER people and said, we will pay you X million dollars per episode extra just to keep making it for another year or two. Just out of the blue. Everybody was thinking, well, we're done. We've had a good run. Thanks a lot and goodbye. And what are we doing next? And the network came in and said, not so fast. And they did it for 2, 3 years. And guess what the producers did? Because I was right next door on another soundstage.
Ooh, what did they do, Lou?
They came around one day with a bunch of checks, a bunch of envelopes. And everybody from the third assistant gaffer to the cinematographer got a check. Just a here, enjoy, check. Because they couldn't really raise their weekly wages that much, but they wanted to reward them and share in the success. But you know what happened when they did that? People were thrilled, of course. Now, granted, they had to pay union dues and taxes and pension and health and all the rest of that stuff. It wasn't free money, but it was in some cases. I mean, I knew a grip who got a check for $9,000. Well, if you're working along and suddenly somebody says, oh, by the way, here, how many people out there would like that? And some of them were for 20 and 30 and 50 and $100,000. Guess what happened when we talked in that discussion on the contract about hours worked in a day and meal penalties and going over and having on that show from that point on, if they said, hey guys, we're going to go 15 minutes into the meal penalty, that's cool, right? Nobody complained. Nobody filed for the money. Nobody asked for anything because they'd already gotten their goodies and everybody was copacetic. So all kinds of fun things happen when that happens. But again, syndication, none of that. Think about that in relationship to YouTube. Can you find any similarity? Because again, the big concept shift you have to understand between traditional TV and even to some degree HBO and Showtime and all that, but certainly to streaming stuff, is this idea of a time slot. This idea of the most you can watch it is when they show it, and they don't show it 24/7, 365 on demand. So if they do that, they change the metric and they change the ability to keep score as to how many people actually are watching, which is what the advertisers want to know before they pony up their money. and how much? All right, we could go on about this forever, but I think that gives you something to think about.
I think so. I think so. What would you say you were talking about maybe 6 or 7 seasons? Was that the kind of the minimum threshold for
The minimum
syndication?
threshold would be about 4. You need
Okay.
about 100 shows,
Okay.
about 100. Because
Gotcha.
if you take 100 and you divide it by 5 or 6 and you divide it by the weeks in the year, you get the idea.
Gotcha.
But you get the idea of how many they could plug in. The question is, how often is the audience sated? Now, you mentioned a statistic, or Jonas did, I forget who, when we did that show, that said that some people now were binge watching, what was it, Golden Girls in 10 weeks, seeing the entire however many years of output in 8 to 10 weeks or even less. So at what point is it, oh, let's watch that one again? And by the way, when you are nowadays choosing to watch things, you can watch, remember that episode with the horse? Let's watch that one again 10 times because we like it. And bring in a friend and say, I know you've seen the show, but have you seen this episode? You know, in my case, I was talking with somebody about this with Marvin, the movie monster. He was looking up some of my shows and asking me, you know, was I on this one and that one? And he thought I saw my name because he knows the real one. And I told him, I said, there was one show I did for several years. And first of all, understand, whether your name shows up on the credits, that's all in the contract too. By law, by contract, I got my own card, as they call it, my own, just my name, nobody else, or my name and one other name. My grandmother, God bless her, my Yiddish grandma, once upon a time, about the 3rd year I was doing that show, called me up and said, I think they're leaving your name on longer. I said, no, Grandma, you're just ready for it. You know when it comes up, and so you're waiting for it. Now, that became an issue, by the way, with the guilds when the TV networks decided to squeeze all the credits over on the side and put ads for the next thing in the main frame at the end. Remember when that all started? Well, heck, if I was entitled to a full card according to the contract, was I getting a full card if I was sharing the screen with something else? Or if, as they did, they speeded up the closing credits to make them run a little less so they could add a few more commercials. So all of this stuff that sounds like it's vanity, it isn't, because it's a form of compensation. If you said, you know what, producers, you don't have to put my name on it, but you have to pay me $5,000 an episode extra. They would say, no, we'll put your name on it. That's cheaper. So it's all compensation, whether it's dollars or ego strokes or whatever. And a guy I knew once who was the head of publicity at Universal told me that if you've ever been to LA and driven the Sunset Strip, or you want to go find a movie of it on YouTube, all of these huge billboards and now building wraps, advertising feature films and TV shows on the Sunset Strip, they have checked the metrics and double checked and measured the way that only the ad pub people can. Not one of them ever sold a ticket. It's all there as an ego stroke to the people in the movie or the people who produced the movie to get them to come back and play with them again. So the motivations behind the things that you and I see as the end product and how they came to be are often not what they appear to be.
You can see some of those advertisements on the Sunset Strip right now.
Yeah.
Want them leaping all kinds of...
it's LA's version of Times Square. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah, and some people say that about like Super Bowl ads and stuff. It's like, it really doesn't move the needle in terms of advertisement, but it's for like shareholders. And it's,
but at least there, it's reminding people the product exists.
That's true.
It's not buy this flavor of Schlitz or Budweiser or Tire. Not our new radial super duper XYZ version of Goodyear. Just remember that Goodyear exists in your mind when you're looking at tires or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
And really,
It's
Times
fascinating.
Square gets more eyes because there's more pedestrians. Nobody walks on the Sunset Strip.
Everybody drives, but if
Yeah.
you're stuck in traffic, well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Very funny, very cool. I remember when The Office made its way off of Netflix and onto, I think it was Hulu at the time, but it could have been Peacock as well. That was when NBC was like, okay, we're gonna get into the streaming business ourselves. Anyway, they took their programming back, and that upended, I think, a lot of people and a lot of people's content consumption, because they were like, oh, I like to have something like The Office on the background. And what we're seeing from sitcoms and old shows, at least certainly those with enough episodes for syndication, is that people will they'll have it on in the background, and they'll rack up the viewing minutes that way. I think it's interesting, because now it's like these studio heads are like, oh, okay, well, people do that, then we can sell ads on that platform, and what like I said, what's old is new again, because that's basically TV at that point. Very funny, very amusing. Let's see here.
It's a strange, ever-changing world.
Yes, it is. We have a super chat right here from Liberty Hall's Cat with $2. Thank you so much. Or the 199, as I believe we're calling it now. Quick shout out to both. Thanks for the insights. Oh, thank you so much for that. Very much appreciate it, because earlier in the chat, Call It Games was like, oh, I see the live and immediately thought I need to come over and say how great Lou is. Sorry, Vash. Well, you know what? I agree with you. Lou is absolutely fantastic, and he needs all.
Colic, first of all, it's not a competition. Second of all,
yes,
to the degree that I am good, I don't know about great, but good, Vash brings it all out of me. So it's a partnership. It's like asking for Abbott without Costello, or vice versa, or
it's so
anyway.
funny. Thank you so much for the
who's on first and leave
comments.
to the audience, right?
yeah, exactly. Again, folks, go ahead and ask your questions in here. We love answering them. Thank you so much for doing that. Josh Hammond has asked this a couple of times here. Well, so let's go ahead and answer this one. Quick question: when we were going to see Jonas live stream Mass Effect Trilogy playthrough on that game place? Well, I can't. I don't know what the that game place. Obviously, it is a group effort to make that channel possible. Culture's doing some absolutely incredible stuff over there, and Jonas is as well, and I know a lot of that Park Place crew is doing some great stuff over there. I think that the current plan is to have Jonas watch Marvin play, and then Marvin go through every single cutscene available in the game as part of Jonas, or I'll take Jonas's romp through that.
You'll never see me over there, because I only play old fart games and nobody cares.
Well, they might have a retro section for you, Lou. I think they might.
Okay.
And
we'll
it'd be cool to like have like a special on Roller Coaster Tycoon or something like that, right? Or Planet Coaster.
Okay.
And go into.
Oh, I do know. I'm looking forward. Planet Coaster has a new version coming out.
Yes,
they've previewed some goodies.
Oh, so cool. So I cannot wait for that. That's going to be fantastic. But it'd be cool, kind of cool to have like a, that Park Place kind of tie-in stream right there, and do something like that. There are a lot of opportunities for that in the future. Here we go. Netty Squirrel 8 with $5. Thank you so much. Hey guys, Lou, you said that sitcoms as we know them are gone. Do you think we will ever see any entertainment with a 25 episode or similar season?
I doubt it. I can see there being an aggregate of as many episodes as we did in the grand old days when I did shows that ran record-breaking numbers like 80 or 100 episodes. But I don't see anybody committing for that long, because the audience is so damn fickle. Never mind, is the Acolyte going to get a season 2? Everybody's wondering, well, nobody lasted 8 episodes of season 1. So the idea of committing upfront to 25, I doubt it. I really doubt it.
Yeah, we have a story on that Park Place actually going over Luis Fernando and some of the industry insiders covering the ratings for original streaming series and so forth. And the Acolyte, yeah, I mean it may have been in the top 10 at first. It dropped off entirely. It's nowhere at all in the top 10 after I think the third or fourth episode. So
and more importantly, back to that scorecard again. Remember with streaming shows, other than now the brave old world, I call it, of advertising, because it's really going back to TV and its origins, except how to measure it is the issue. The only thing a show brings to Disney Plus or other membership forums like that is members. So if I was to boldly say, we're going to make 25 episodes of this fantastic idea, and after 4, 5, 6, it's not bringing in new members, is there any reason for me to believe that making another 10 or 15 is going to do any better? And how much are they going to cost? The only way I could see somebody committing to that kind of number, and even then that's on the outside edge, would be for documentary. If anybody still had the stomach after, the so-called History Channel became all Teutonic bad guys all the time.
Right.
If somebody said, we're going to do a history of World War I or World War II, because we think there's enough interest after all this time, and to truly cover it in depth, it's going to take us 25 episodes. I still say that after 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, if the audience didn't show up, it ain't going to happen. They can't afford to commit to that kind of an expenditure without knowing it's going to make a serious and ongoing impact on the membership numbers, because that's what pays the bills.
It's really interesting.
Assuming I should put a caveat. Assuming anybody gives a damn about paying the bills anymore.
That's a fair point.
I'm looking at you, Captain America, shoot number 432. I'm looking at you, Rachel, and her 7, 8, 12, 14 semi-animated. I don't know.
Demolition Man, as you were pointing out on the last episode, Demolition Man was filmed with big explosions and big action sequences, like you described. But before that, it was like 6 years in development.
6 years working the script out, and it still went over budget because of weather. Because you have to do all that stuff outside. And some people said, why are we spending all this money on this big opening? And go watch the movie again, folks. The opening pyro thing I'm talking about that sets up the story is massive. But the whole movie takes place several years in the future, when they've eliminated all violence and homogenized everything, and they fine you for saying words that Jonas doesn't want me to say on this channel. But the writer said, until you've seen Kansas, you don't understand what Oz is. That was the way he described why that prologue was necessary. Yep. And he was right. Even in a semi-comedic, satiric way, you had to understand why these people who'd grown up without all that were so totally unprepared for it when they thaw out Wesley Snipes and he starts doing it again. So...
Man, so true. Such a great line, by the way. Such a great line. Need more Wesley Snipes in our modern context.
On the other hand, a few weeks later, we did Escape from New York. The premise of which is that Snake Plissken, our hero, was a celebrated war veteran and special forces guy who decided to rob a Federal Reserve bank of some kind, got caught, and was about to go get thrown into the prison of New York when they offer him this deal to save the president who's trapped there. They actually shot the robbery. Did you know that? They shot the whole thing, and then realized it's just getting in the way of starting the movie. Let's forget about it and just mention it in passing. So that cost whatever it cost. The picture was still low budget. The picture was still a success. But if somebody had waited 6 months and said, maybe we don't need this, they would have saved a chunk of change. So it's
Fantastic.
storytelling. You have to get the story to work and the characters to work, and then cast people who can do it instead of finding out, oops. And the cases we do know of movies in the last 30, 40 years where people got replaced, where, for example, who was it? The kid that was originally Back to the Future, and then they fired him after a week and got Eric Schultz,
Eric Schultz. Yep.
Well, they found out in a week, didn't they? And they took action. They didn't shoot an entire movie and then say, I don't know, maybe we need a new guy, and let's reshoot 3/4 of the movie.
The way I've heard it is that they shot quite a bit of the movie with Eric Schultz, but you're right though. I mean,
all I'm saying is if you get it right because you spend the time,
right,
and you don't feel compelled by we've got a slot in June of 2020, whatever. The object should be to make the best product, because the best product made by people who understand the audience is most liable to get butts in seats, period. But they lose sight of that. They put other priorities on it. They put egos. They put inter-corporate politics. They put, I'm not going to bore everybody by going into all the things that don't have to do. Remember always the famous story about Michelangelo unveiling his statue of David, which, if you've never seen it, you need to go to Italy and go see it, because all the copies in the world won't begin to tell you what an amazing piece of work that is. But the story is they're having the big unveiling, and several of his fans are standing there just fawning over it, rightly. And they go to the maestro and they say, Michelangelo, how in the world, from a cold stone piece of rock, did you create this amazing living, breathing thing? And he said, quote, I just cut away everything that didn't look like David. Well,
one of my favorite quotes.
Well, do they do that in Hollywood these days? Do they cut away everything that doesn't look like Star Wars? If they don't know what the hell Star Wars is about and they have a warped view of it, they couldn't even begin to start that amputation because,
To be fair, Lou, to the producers of The Acolyte, if they did cut out everything that didn't look like Star Wars, there would be no show. So I think that's the main thing about that. They had to create a show.
How would the accountants at the Home Office feel about that right now?
The worst $200 million ever spent.
And by the way, let's always remember what we call opportunity cost.
Mm-hmm.
If The Acolyte had never happened, what would have been in its place, and what effect would it potentially have had on growing memberships for Disney Plus, which is all that matters? Just as we said when they started Disney Plus, they said it's going to cost us X million, billion, 100 million, I forget the number, to set up the servers, to set up the advertising, to literally make the platform before we ever put stuff on it. But it costs more than that. Even if you were only going to show all the classic vintage Disney stuff and all the new movies Disney made, how much were you getting from HBO? How much were you getting from Amazon that you're saying, nope, we're only going to show them on our own thing? Well, whatever it was you were getting or would have gotten on new things is also a cost. It's also a deficit. So whatever you think you lost by making this turkey, consider the opportunity cost you lost, and whether even if you made this turkey, it would have actually gotten you more revenue directly by franchising it out, by syndicating it out, by selling it somewhere that was willing to pay you, because they've got hours and hours and hours and hours of time to fill already. And you become a part of their variety of things rather than an exclusive and badly serving the fans of part of your own thing, if you see what I mean. So.
No, you're right. That's the thing about the Acolyte is that there's no ancillary revenue there. There's no like, oh, some other network's gonna pick it up or something.
Let's
There's
put
no
it this way: the toys they would sell would not be of interest to most parents to have for their kids.
Oh yeah, I mean, and you know what advertiser wants to be associated with the Acolyte at all? I mean, something that fell out of the top 10 almost
Well,
immediately.
and you don't have to go to the Acolyte.
Sure.
Hits have problems. Inside Out too. They selling
Yeah.
many toys? Are they selling many toys
It's a fair point.
compared to Minions Part 4 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
which are being compared across the board because hey, they're both animated and they're both hits and they're
Mm-hmm.
coming out at more or less the same time. But it's not just the ticket sales; it's all the other goodies.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's
all.
That's all new Hollywood. We're supposed to talk about old or intermittent.
Speaking of old Hollywood,
so
this
yes.
Eric Stoltz on the
Yeah.
set filming for Back to the Future, the original. Yeah, they filmed for a number of weeks with Eric Stoltz, and some of the reaction shots that you get from other characters, not from obviously the character of Marty McFly himself, but other characters interacting with him, are actually interspersed with the Eric Stoltz shoots
Sure,
and the reshoots that took place. And I know,
I think I told the story about reshoots. They can happen just because, believe it or not, just like at Photomat, the lab can screw up your film. And I did a show once that was being done as a mid-season replacement. In other words, it didn't have a time slot yet. Great show, too. Should have been a hit, but wasn't handled well. Damn shame. We made, I think, 9, and they only aired 7, and it went away. And I regret it because it was a great show. But
right.
because it didn't have a time slot, in those days, no two time slots were the same. Believe it or not, as far as the running time of the show, they were from 7:30 to 8, whether it was Tuesday or Friday or whatever, or 8:30 to 9. But you didn't know, because it was different times of the night, when the intrusions of things like this recent breaking news would come on. Because in those days, remember, they put in these news breaks between shows as a way of getting the audience to say, hey, at 10 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, or tomorrow night at 7:30, our network news people are going to be covering this story and you'll want to watch it. It wasn't to keep people updated on breaking news, because if it was, they'd have shut the sitcom down and gone into it in detail, like I'm sure they're doing all over the air right now. It was commercials for the network, for their news, but they were of different lengths. The 7:30 to 8 o'clock one was a few seconds different than the 9:30 to 10 o'clock one. Therefore, they're editing our show. They're waiting for a spot to put it on. And it turned out one scene we shot, there were some problems in the lab. Literally, the film got screwed up. So they said, guys, we're going to have to go reshoot that one scene. But to make sure it matches the stuff that didn't get screwed up, because remember, we have 4 cameras. They don't all go bad at the same time, you hope. We're going to bring in the current edited version with the one shot that went wrong so we can reshoot to match it, right? And I saw something I have never seen before or since. I saw a video of a scene of a sitcom with 9 sets of time code, all at the bottom in little lines. Now, for those who don't know,
9 sets.
Time code is what you edit by. It's a bunch of numbers that keep everything in sync. But the reason there were 9 sets is there were 9 different versions of the show being edited simultaneously, so that when the word came, hey, you got the 8:30 to 9 slot, we pick that one and it's ready to go on the air. So when you talk about using reaction shots from the old stuff to mix in with the new stuff with the new actor, there's an extreme example, right? 9 sets of time code on 1 half-hour show. And you're literally at that point slicing microseconds off of the reaction to a joke. Or it's not a question of, well, we're going to cut out this joke because it wasn't as funny. You've got it past that. Now it's, well, how long can he wink back at him afterwards? Or how long can we cut to, when we cut to the shot where there's an insert of a hand reaching for a Coca-Cola, is it 8 seconds or 9 seconds. I mean, does any of that matter in the eventual scheme of things? Probably not, but it sure gets interesting.
I'm trying to find a photo of a
Something with time code.
yeah with a time code on it. I can't find one right now, but
It's called time code because it's literally the running time from the moment
Yeah.
the show started. It's 0 minutes and 0 seconds and 0 tenths of a second and zero, as finely as you can cut it, because that's what editors do is chop pieces. Used to be it was physically filmed. Now it's all electronic. So anyway, you can see the problem. So when you talk about mixing different pieces with different actors into the same eventual product, well, it can be done. And every second you don't spend reshooting everybody else is money saved, or at least not new money spent on top of old.
Wow, that's really that's unbelievably fast.
You as an editor especially appreciate that. I don't know if everybody out
yes,
there does.
I do, because you're like I mentioned in a prior thing, genre guys. You're speaking to my soul, Lou, when you say all this, because man, the finer you can get with your details, the better the cut will eventually be.
You hope.
You hope, right? But sometimes somebody will at least with
I see a super chat from TLJ Screwjob.
TLJ Screwjob with $4.99. Lou,
And
how
he
does
asks-
being an EP work? Some movies have EPs where you're asked if they had any input at all, and others, like the Mario movie. Should go ahead and break this down.
Does EP, are you using that as executive producer?
I think so.
Okay, I'm just asking because people have different sense. Basically, an EP brings money. Is usually what that means.
Right.
It usually means, well, we need 20 million. We can get 10 from the studio and we can get 5 from these guys. And in order to get a piece of the action, these guys will bring. So sometimes it's literally a name and it's on the credits and they have no input other than money, which might be the input that they have to have. As far as being actively, creatively involved, maybe they brought the property. Maybe they bought the book when it was still in galleys and nobody knew it was good, and now they've got to weigh in. EP is a very flexible definition. There's all these variations on producers, I remember when I was at film school, one of our wonderfully crusty instructors, he said, an associate producer is anybody who's an idiot enough to associate with the producer. So you never know is the answer to that question. But usually, TLJ Screwjob, that's a money participant or something. Maybe they've got something other than money, like a time slot on London television, or a association with a distributor in a market that you'd like to get into that would be difficult or expensive to do otherwise. All depends. It's a financial relationship primarily, not a creative one.
Yeah, I want to say the executive producer role is very interesting. I think I've seen it in a few places. I think Steven Spielberg has a bunch of executive producer credits out there. I thought that George Lucas was executive producer on Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back, but I could be wrong about that. Go ahead, Lou.
In the case of famous folks like actors and big producer directors, it could be a different way of compensating them. For example,
right,
if I'm going to pay you $20 million to star in my movie, if I pay it to you as an actor, all those little deductions we talked about for pensions and health and welfare come off of that, and my agent gets a percentage of that. But if instead I'm going to pay you some of it as an executive producer, well, that's a separate pocket you could put it into for perhaps tax purposes. And in some cases, when I said it's somebody bringing something monetarily, what they might bring monetarily is their name. We talked about in our discussion about the contract, about we were talking about Halo for some reason because it got canceled after 2, and how originally it had Spielberg and Jackson associated with it, and then it didn't. But the answer is it may not have gotten beyond that stage unless it had them associated with it, because everybody likes to put a famous name on the front of their show. So
Sure.
that's a value too. That's not necessarily a monetary value. In fact, it may be a cost to get them to come play and put their name on it.
Right.
But somebody decides it's worth it, and it happens.
There you go. It's the wonderful magic of Hollywood, folks. That is for sure. We have one more question right here, and I think we'll wrap it up after this one. Colic Games. I saw your comment there. On a more serious note, how much do you think will increase the costs for production on average? I'm assuming this will reflect to ticket prices. I believe talking about the IATSE agreement here.
Well, when we did the show, I said it would average 8 to 10% on every production. But does that directly translate to ticket price? No.
I think so.
In fact, back when I was in film school a million years ago, there was a guy named Art Murphy who was Daily Variety's economics guy. He was the number cruncher. He was the Jonas J. Campbell of Daily Variety. And he said, one thing you have to remember about showbiz, movie biz, is that it is the only major industry in the world where the cost of the production of the product or service that they're selling bears zero relationship to the cost at the consumer level. You can go to any multiplex in our nation today and see 10, 12 movies, all of which had different costs and budgets, all of which had much varied financial schemes, all of which cost whatever the going rate is. What, 12, 14? I don't know. I haven't been in a while. So as far as a direct correlation, no. It's more a question of, does it get made at all?
Yeah.
Or where does it get made for? Because like I was talking about production management, if I shoot, scripts are funny things. Theoretically, what you're trying to do out there is, get pages in the can, pages of script. But movies are funny things. You can turn a page after pages and pages of dialogue, and the guy's going off to war, and the girl loves him and doesn't want him to go, and they talk about their hopes and their dreams for the future and their parents and his dog being there when he gets back, and whatever, for 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. I can shoot that in a day. And then you turn the page and it says, and then World War II happens. How long does it take me to shoot that page? What does it cost me to shoot that page?
Right.
So all pages are not created equal, is the point. And if somebody looks at a script and says, you know what, with good marketing and good audience reaction, that will make at the box office X $100 million. And somebody else says, but what if it costs 10 or 12% more to make it? Well, it'll still make that at the box office because that won't affect the return, but it won't get into profit. We'll pass. Or can you cut out 15 pages or whatever? You see what I mean?
Right.
So,
yeah, that's the way these things work.
There is no direct, but as far as it reflecting ticket prices, the ticket prices are going to be a factor of, well, if I'm the theater or the studio and I want to make more money, if I raise the ticket price, however we divvy it up, we're going to have more to divvy if we sell the same number of tickets. If I raise the ticket price and people still come and people still buy popcorn at the same rate and buy drinks at the same rate, I'm okay. But if by raising it, people at home say, oh, hell, I don't want to pay that much, I'll wait till it gets on TV, then I didn't help myself, did I? So somebody makes that decision, and nobody knows whether it's right or wrong until you do it.
I wanted to ask you about this. I think this is fascinating. Should there be variable pricing when it comes to tickets and movies at your local multiplex? Because you see the marquee, you see the titles that are on there, and a lot of them are tentpoles, a lot of them are big budget action, a lot of them are big productions, and unfortunately that's kind of left a lot of like the rom-coms or the small dramatic thrillers a lot of that stuff behind because I guess there's a special emphasis placed on franchise films and stuff that'll bring the masses to the theaters to actually go see, and so we're not seeing a lot of those things produced back in the day. But variable pricing would suggest that okay, maybe your tentpole big budget feature costs this much to get in. Maybe it's like $16, and then maybe $8 gets you into a rom com. Could that be an economic model that could work for the industry, or too much hurdle to overcome there?
The answer is it exists now, and it's called TV. Because it used to be a stigma. Oh, well, I don't make television. I only do movies, motion pictures. That isn't there anymore at all, really. And if a rom-com, if it's the experience of a couple going out, having dinner, going to the movies, smooching in the back row and going home, what can you take out of that to make it? Saying, well, it's $2 less doesn't change it. Saying it's no dollars for the movie other than my monthly thing I'm paying for to get sports and news and everything else coming down the wire anyway, I'll make my own damn popcorn and we'll smooch at home and it'll be a shorter run to the other room in the house. So the answer is I don't think that would make a dent. And I think so? I think that those movies are inevitably, that movie-going experience, which I think is valuable, is fast disappearing for those kind of stories. Will it come back? Maybe. But certainly those 50 million people were not only watching Westerns or only watching science fiction or whatever existed in those days as big action versus, The Thin Man and Sherlock Holmes and all the lower production value things, is a puzzlement. There are too many ways to see things for any one way to reign supreme. But when you talk about changing ticket prices, you pay more to go see it in IMAX, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a fair point. Your PLFs are going to
and if you really think about it, what that means is, oh, you think you got a big screen at home in your man cave at 65 inches? Well, watch this.
Right.
But pay me for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there is some variable pricing already baked into the cake, right? I know AMC has a scheme where, the best seats in the house are a little bit more than your edges and so forth. You have obviously your PLFs or your premium large format screens and your formats and stuff.
But this idea of buying the seats by where they are off a map is so new to America.
It is.
I mean, I remember, going to England when I was 16 years old and being shocked that they were selling the seats that way. And also being shocked that even with that, they were putting commercials on the screen. And, they had the little lady, like you've all seen the thing in, productions of Rocky Horror Show with the girl with the little tray with the snacks on it coming out and singing. That's what happened. Not singing, but the girls with the snack trays were in every theater in England. They came around at the intermission between the commercials and the real movie and sold you your stuff, your candy and your ice cream and all the rest of that.
Sure.
So, heck, I don't know. It just adds a layer of complexity. And of course, what they never realized it would do is when all of our guys talk about they're going to see, well, now it'd be what, Deadpool and things.
Yeah, Deadpool.
And they pull up the map and show it to us shows and say, look, there's only 400 seats available and it's the day before. What the hell's going on here? And all these projections we hear of box office based on advanced ticket sales, that never happened. That never happened. So
I remember
everybody's trying to find a new way to skin a cat. And everybody in the process of finding all these wonderful new ideas is forgetting the only idea that matters, which is make a better cat.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, I remember going to a Marvel film and waiting outside the theater, 3 to 4 hours in which to get the best seat. I remember going to Star Wars and Indiana Jones 4, I believe, and waiting almost 24 hours for those productions, for those films to be released because they didn't have advanced reserve seating, and now that whole paradigm has completely
exactly.
changed. It's quite stunning. Well, Lou,
And funny enough, when these big screens, when the IMAXs come along,
yeah,
it's more important because
absolutely.
I don't want to sit down front and wear the movie, but I don't want to sit in the back left corner and lose 90% of the value of the IMAX effect or the 3D effect, especially.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in that comfort perfect zone in the middle, somewhere 2/3 up, and so I don't know.
It's so true, Lou. It is so you're you're again speaking to my soul because this is what these are the what's going through my mind when I'm trying to see a big budget blockbuster in the theaters. Well, thank you so much, Lou. I guess we'll see us at the movies, I suppose. On that note, right there, Lou, what do you got coming up on the genre, guys?
Well, lately we've been recording a few double headers that you don't see them that way, but we make them that way only because Mr. Tables is taking a sojourn in August and won't be available. And we have Marvin of the Movies who's going to guest shot with us. But we're shooting tonight a double feature with the regular guys, which is Tables and Lauren and I. And it's an interesting pair of movies. It's a couple of movies, one of which you probably remember so well that you think, why bother? Another of which you might not know, but I sure hope you do. And tonight is Airport, the original. Airport, the trendsetter, the start of the disaster movies. And you know what? Gosh, it's good. For all of the hokum and corniness and it's really good. And what will amaze you perhaps is how really, really, really good Dean Martin is when he puts his mind to it in that movie. Fantastic. And then, of course, we're doing something completely different. Well, not completely in the sense that it's an all-star movie, but we're doing, come on, Dan, an interesting oddball movie that I'd never heard of, that Tables hadn't, but that is one of Lauren's favorites. And I watched it a couple nights ago, and you know what? It's really interesting and fun, and it's called The 13th Floor. And it is a sci-fi movie about a creation of a simulated world by a bunch of computer scientists that you can walk into. And that all sounds pretty standard sci-fi stuff, right? Well, what if it turns out you creating this simulated world are actually in a simulated world being created by another world on top of yours? And they don't want you to know. And somebody starts killing people. And the worlds are all LA, but the one that we're in the movie is in LA in the 90s. The one that they're creating is LA in the 1930s. And the one that's real is LA. The last scene of the movie is June 2024. So how's that for relevance? It's got some third act issues, but sure. It's a really fun movie. And then let's see, next week we're doing a double header of one of my favorite Westerns that most people have never, ever, ever. And that is Alvarez Kelly, which is Bill Holden and Richard Widmark. And it's so good. It is so good. And it even has a theme song. Remember when Western TV shows had a theme song? Well, this is a Western movie with a theme song about Alvarez Kelly, and he's that Irish senor. I mean, it's just fun, you know. It's fun in the way that classic Hollywood knew how to have fun.
Sure.
And then down the way, golly, we've got so many good ones coming. We're going to do Master and Commander. We're going to do Spaceballs. We're going to do the original Superman. We're going to do a lot of movies.
Oh, man. Yeah, that 13th Floor sounds like a mixture between Tron and Matrix, and well, I think Matrix
It's
came out the same
yeah,
same
it-
year.
yeah. It's kind of a different take on a Matrix thing. It's Roland Emmerich, by the way, as far as the producing and everything,
Really? That's fun.
and Armin Miller-Stahl, and it's really, really, really well done. Even though it doesn't quite work, it's close enough that I was
Right.
very happy to enjoy it.
Well, that's fantastic. Of course, on
And then
this channel,
meanwhile, here, what are we putting out? You just did Ace in the Hole, and I thought that was so funny because same director, same creative mind of Billy Wilder, going very grim in Ace in the Hole, and yet his classic comedy, which some people say is the funniest movie ever made. I don't think I'd go that far, which is Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon and Marilyn Monroe in Some Like It Hot, is the show currently up on the original venue for these things on the Pro Channel. So you've got a Billy Wilder double feature between the two right now this week. And it's funny, Billy Wilder was asked after making, talk about production delays costing money and stars. Supposedly, Marilyn Monroe's temperamentalness and not coming to the set and not being on time cost the making of Some Like It Hot something like $50,000, which was a lot of money in the budget in those days. And afterwards, somebody asked him, would he like to make another movie with Marilyn Monroe? And Wilder said, well, I talked to my doctor and my accountant and my psychiatrist, and they both said I'm too rich and too crazy already. I don't need that aggravation. So, or something to that effect. But anyway, and it's funny because all of this ties together always with the mouse, because I just watched a video. I don't know if you've seen these two guys from Australia who call it Review Time, who do theme park stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
But they just did a whole thing on Disney hotels, and of course made the point that the Grand Floridian was copied from the Del Coronado in San Diego, which is where they made Some Like It Hot. So 6 degrees of separation is 4.5 degrees around here.
That's amazing.
Anyway, and that's a good video if you want to go out there and look for it, guys. They do good stuff on Review Time.
Oh, Review Time is excellent. They produce excellent content. That is absolutely for sure. Great historical pieces as well, all in there. The next one that we're going to have on this channel, the next genre, guys, that we're going to have on this channel is going to be actually Hercules. So that should be very,
which
very
they're still trying to make a new live action musical version of, but hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet. We'll
at the rate
see
they're going, I'm not
there.
holding my breath. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see. You never know. It's Hollywood, the land of hopes and dreams and nets, in that book I mentioned. So we certainly appreciate everybody coming here and looking into it with us, especially in times that are awfully complicated in the rest of the world. We persevere. We persevere.
Yes.
So
now you can keep up with all the election coverage, because man, oh man, that's probably going to be the main story for a while here.
Yeah, for a day or so, and then, but you know, I will just say this: the very wise thing, and maybe I said this earlier too, but the wise thing about that whole Republican convention was that they made it about policies and issues, not personalities, at least not on the other side. So the more things change, the more they'll remain the same, I think. So we'll see.
So true. So true. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today on a fantastic episode of Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. Lou, you are what makes us work here, but it's really the audience. It's you viewers at home sending us the questions. Like I said, if you want to go ahead and send us your questions, you can go and do so at t3ponline@yahoo.com. Thank you so much for sending us, for supporting us in the ways that you do, for commenting in the chats and keeping this show driving. Everybody gets a kick out of it. We've heard nothing but fantastic reviews. So thank you so much for making this all possible. And, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet subscribed. Go ahead and like this video if you did like this video. Share us out, as it helps us out tremendously against the YouTube algorithm. And I guess we will see you at the movies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.